Hey guys, it's been quite some time since I've broadcasted here on my podcast, and well, a lot has been happening, and a lot of nothing has also been happening this year for me. As some of you know, I had coronavirus back in March, and it's been a really rough ride since then. My body actually developed an autoimmune response to the virus, and well, I mean, it also could have been other things and whatnot. You know, life's a bit difficult and complicated like that, but nonetheless, I've had one of my hardest years of my life with my health, and I'm here now to share part of that journey with you. I have a bit of a longer episode today, but I wanted to get into detail about what's happened for me and what it's been like living with this illness, and now coming out kind of the other end of it. Still got a bit of work to do, but coming out the other end of it with a different sense of perception on life, some new wisdom, and some other ways of like practical things and mindset things that we can all learn and take from my experience, hopefully. I feel like it's kind of my moral obligation to share some things that I've experienced and learned along the way to help others prevent it or just have a better quality of life. So thanks, guys, for listening in. I have a good friend and colleague of mine, Jessica Wilkie, here to reverse interview me to give a little bit more energy and insight into the podcast episode. She's fantastic. She also has an opportunity to share some of her wisdom working as a counselor and a coach this year. So guys, listen through to the end. There's a lot of cool stuff in there. Go for a walk, put your earphones in, do the dishes, do the washing, and listen on. One thing I wanted to mention was that I forgot to mention in the episode, actually, that a few people have been asking me about was, am I now immune to the virus because I had the virus? And I got a blood test about 3 months after having the virus, and it came back saying that I had no antibodies in my system. And it actually said that we don't actually know if you actually ever had COVID at all. Which, you know, they're only really saying that because the antibodies weren't showing up. So that's kind of fascinating. And they asked me to come back for another blood test, which I need to do, but I haven't done yet. So that's kind of the update there. There's many other things I go into in the episode. So yeah, guys, listen in and reach out if you need help or support, or if you're looking for a counselor or a coach. If you don't want to have me or Jessica as one of your counselors or coaches, we have plenty of other resources and ways to guide you. But whatever you're going through, wherever you are, you shouldn't do it alone, and you don't need to. So reach out if you need support. Thanks, guys, and enjoy the episode. Thanks for being here.
Well, thanks for having me on, Brendon. Obviously I've been watching you do this for a little while. We've known each other for a bit. So I love this opportunity to be able to sit with you and just sort of pick your brain a bit on your experience and just have a chat about, like you said, what's been a crazy, somewhat horrible year for most people. So obviously, first and foremost, I want to get into what's happened for you, because you had COVID, you had the virus, and it didn't stop there. So what happened? Like, you got it, what happened, and what's happened since?
Yeah, well, for all my avid followers, I did a bit of a blog post, during having it. So every day I was doing this YouTube thing. So some of you who are listening might have watched that. I kind of had this idea that was all COVID was going to be. I mean, it was such a new thing, obviously, for everyone. We didn't know whether it was going to be an ongoing thing or just like a flu 2-week thing and then you're done. So for me, after coming out of that, I immediately within about a week developed like a horrible autoimmune response where my whole body started getting covered in like eczema and rashes and things, and I was quite itchy and all that stuff.
And this was post having COVID virus.
Yeah. So I kind of had it for like 2 weeks, and I was locked in my bedroom because I was living with two of my brothers, and they were taking care of me. And so I was locked in my bedroom for 2 weeks, and then after that, about a week later, all of these like horrible symptoms started like surfacing, and I had a huge panic attack one day because of it, and because it was like tip to toe, and I was like, what is going on? And when I was having this panic attack, one of my brothers just rushed me up to RPA because I lived near the hospital there at the time, and I was treated for that, and they gave me all sorts of steroid creams and antibiotics and all that stuff, and because they didn't know whether, it was COVID that caused it or it wasn't. And still to this day, the jury's still out whether it was that or not. But yeah, as we go into more detail, I can definitely share what that's been like. But since then, I mean, we're in November now, and that was back in March or around April. I've kind of gone on this like roller coaster ride of just horrible symptoms and chronic illness.
Yeah, it's, and I've kind of seen part of that journey, because when, I knew you had the virus and I saw that from afar, but then, as you moved back sort of to this area and we caught up and you told me what had been going on, and watching you since then, it's been non-stop for you. Hasn't it?
Yeah. Like, I mean, there's been periods where I've been able to breathe, as I would say, but for a lot of it, it's just been like an illness and which was physical, but also then became a psychological illness as well, because the two are connected, as you and I both know. And it's just been a huge battle this whole year with just really trying to take hold of my health and body and find the formula that works for me.
Yeah. And that's, I think a really important part that would be really good to dig into a little bit more is the psychological side of it, like how that impacted your mental health. But for those, I guess, that aren't aware of what journey you've been on, because most people think, okay, people get the virus, they recover from it. But that hasn't happened for you. So maybe just a little bit of detail around like what on earth has happened since then, like how bad that physical illness has been for you.
Yeah. Look, I don't even know where to start. It's been like such a huge, long and blurry journey. But, it started where like I actually moved from Sydney back to Terrigal, where, I grew up on the Central Coast. So I thought, you know what, why don't I get out of the city, try and breathe a little bit. I needed a bit of a change. I was in lockdown for like 2 or 3 weeks in my bedroom sort of thing. And so I was starting to think that maybe I'm reacting to something in the room.
Yeah.
They were demolishing a building next to us. So I was like, maybe I'm just having a reaction to that. And so again, I don't know if it was specifically COVID that caused it, but like I guess actually one thing to note was like a couple of like months prior to getting COVID, I actually started developing a little bit of a rash around my face already.
Yeah.
So I would say that my body was already a bit deficient. And there was probably some signs my body was telling me that I was ignoring. Like our bodies do that. Yeah. If you ever get any sort of illness, it tends to be something that you need to change about your lifestyle, right? Yeah. And for me, when I reflect on that time, it was like January, February. I just finished the degree. And I was under a lot of stress with just finances. Poker was pretty intense for me at the time and wasn't going well. Just so many things were kind of happening and I was ignoring those signs. I was still living the same lifestyle, and I think that may have been one of the reasons why I got COVID in the first place. Because when you're deficient and when you're weak and when you don't take care of yourself, you're more likely to get sick from pathogens flying in past the immune barriers, right? So again, like I wouldn't say that it was just COVID that caused that, but I would definitely say that COVID was one of the contributing factors that just was like, okay, I'm going to crash everything now.
Almost like a catalyst for what came next.
Yeah. And then what came next was, so I moved back to Terrigal. I came straight to my parents' house first until I found a place to move into on my own. And that had a short time frame because, I mean, like anyone might know, living with your parents can get a bit full on sometimes, as much as I love them. But after about 3 weeks of that, my symptoms started clearing up a little bit actually at that time. So, rather than just being everywhere in my body with the rashes and everything, it started clearing up and I still only quite had it around my face. And so I changed a few things during that time. I went on little like times where I was like, oh, I'll cut out sugar for a week, or I'll cut out this for a week, and maybe it's something I'm eating, so I really tried to experiment around that time. But I was on a course of antibiotics at the time and using steroid creams, which I usually, if anyone knows me, I would usually avoid all pharmaceutical drugs at all costs. But at the time it was like I was in such a horrible state that I decided to go with it. So that cleared things up in the short term, which most Western medicine things do because they treat symptoms, not root causes. And then, I ended up finding a place to live and moved out about a couple of streets away from mum and dad here. And within a space of about 2 or 3 weeks, which was about 3 weeks after the course of antibiotics and everything, everything just came back with a vengeance. Like, and it wasn't just rashes. It started becoming like, heart palpitations, chronic fatigue, like headaches, insomnia, because I was up all night itching, and like I literally would sleep for like 2 hours every night. It was really horrible.
Which it just, and you're talking about that in those first few weeks, but here we are, like you said, in November, and this has been ongoing for you. And when you have pain and illness and lack of sleep for that long, like you mentioned before, like with the psychological journey that it's been as well for you. So mentally, like, how has that journey impacted you? Because the physical stuff is major, but, and correct me if I'm wrong, like the mental side of things I feel like would have been even more of a challenge in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like I said before, your mind and body have this connection that, well, most of us are quite disconnected, right?
Yes.
But it does have a connection. And when you have that harmony between the both, that's when you're going to flourish.
Yeah.
And for me, I clearly couldn't find that balance. And the thing that really caused a lot of psychological stress, which then created more symptoms, was, well, firstly not sleeping, but it was like kind of like, how do I sleep when I'm like in all this pain all the time? Like, so it's sort of a revolving door there with that. But yeah, a big stress was that I just didn't know what was going on, and I didn't know how to correctly like heal myself, because like I tried already a few things, and some kind of worked short term but then didn't, and then it came back. And so like I started feeling a little bit defeated already. There was a little bit of that going on, and sometimes you kind of like, when you're weak, I mean, most people listening will know, I mean, we all have things that we give into, whether it be like substances or food or whatever it might be. We often give in when we're weak, and we've tried things and we throw in the towel. So that kind of like was the start, and this is back in, say, June, I would say, this year, or end of May, June. So that's like 6 months ago now. That's when it really just spiraled to this just horrible revolving door of like trying things, not working, trying things, and the stress of that really created a lot of heat and just inflammation in my body. And so the next step for me, like I tried the Western medicine thing. So the next step for me was, okay, I'm going back to the natural thing. So I got a naturopath. And we kind of went on this journey for about 2 or 3 months, because you really got to try things. When you're in chronic illness, you've really got to try for a certain amount of time. You don't just try for a week and think, oh, well, that didn't work. You got to try things for like a month or two and really see how your body reacts to really know, especially when it's a chronic thing, right? So I tried the thing with the naturopath, and she was really, really helpful. She was like really in tune to like a lot of things and what was going on. She basically felt that it was a histamine thing. If you like kind of like scratch your skin and like it gets all red really quickly, like that's usually a histamine thing. So we kind of went on this like low histamine diet, and all sorts of supplements and everything like that. Like I was on so many supplements because my body was deficient for whatever reason, right? But then I had a blood test, and the blood test basically said that my liver was like failed. It was like, you have ranges that your liver needs to be in, and it was like 4 times what it needed to be. So I realized after like probably 6 to 8 weeks of doing all these supplements, all my other levels went up, like vitamin C, D, B, copper, zinc, everything went up, right? But the thing is, my liver was not working properly, and so the symptoms weren't clearing up. So the doctors basically said, or actually I went to Chinese medicine practitioners then. They basically said, oh, look, your liver's not actually processing the supplements properly, so we've got to get off all of them right now. So it's actually doing probably more harm than good right now. I know it's been a bit of a monologue, but this is kind of the story. So I want to kind of lay out the story first. And then it'd be cool to like talk about some other things about the psychological side of things. Okay, and then so, I went to, like I tried that for like a good 6 to 8 weeks, and like I really couldn't get anything that really worked, right? So the symptoms were all still there. Then I kind of threw in the towel for a bit, where it was like a good month or so of like, I, even decided, look, if I can't sleep, why don't I try like smoking some weed before bed? Like I've heard that helps with sleep. So I did that. And then obviously that helped, and it knocked me out for like 10 hours every night. But it didn't take long for that to compromise all sorts of other lifestyle things, because then you have brain fog, and you're slow and you forget things, and your sense of reality is like all over the place. You get paranoia, so that has its effects as well. So after a certain amount of time of doing that, it was like, okay, cool. I was able to sleep, but now that's providing different problems. So I was like, I just can't find anything that works.
Yeah.
So then, went to the, Chinese medicine practitioner, and they were said get off all the supplements and everything. They started doing acupuncture. They created all these like personalized creams and all sorts of different things. I made a few other changes with diet and stuff. So I started eating meat again, because all sorts of legumes and beans and any protein that's like for a vegan is actually very high in histamine.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh man, so I literally at this point I'm willing to try anything, and I've been vegetarian for 5 years. So it was a big change for me. But I did that. And then after that, it was about, probably 4 or 5 weeks later where I started noticing a bit of a change. And then I hit absolute rock bottom. I had an absolute regression in everything again. So I was like, oh my God, what's going on? How do I find this thing, Yeah. And the moment where everything hit rock bottom was when I had a panic attack, which was becoming more frequent now, by the way. And this was about 5 weeks ago. The panic attack was so bad, my throat was closing up. I had to be rushed to the hospital because I couldn't breathe, and I was itchy and having all these episodes. But that moment and that day was enough of a rock bottom. I was in emergency for 6 hours. Dad was there helping me and waiting, and waiting for doctors. You don't want to be in that room. No one does, right? And I got myself there for whatever reason, and I just couldn't find the right formula. And since then, I got given these strong antihistamines. I went back to the steroid creams for a little bit just to help clear things up in the short term, because maybe that could help the psychological stress.
Yeah.
And since then, I also cut out every other food, but 5 kind of fruit, 5 vegetables, and either steak or chicken. I did that for 2 weeks, and things really started to clear up.
Yeah.
Not fully there yet, and but it was enough for me to be able to function again and have my life back.
Yeah.
But look, I mean, that's kind of the journey I've been on. There's a lot more detail, obviously, I can share, but to put it in a 5-minute nutshell, that's kind of it. And but the depression, in the isolation, in the pain, the suffering, it got to the point where I was having suicidal thoughts for a good 2 months. It was horrible. So that's kind of the journey,
which is huge. And I think, and like you said, it's just a glimpse into what you've been through, and what you've realized so many people go through as well with chronic illness. But for you, coming from because you're ambitious, and you've studied counseling and coaching, you're all about mindset, and to go from that to that absolute rock bottom point of where, like you said, you've got suicide ideation. What was that like for you, hitting that point in your own life?
It was scary.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's where my body and my mind wants to live, but there are parts of my mind that were in what I would consider the underworld. It's I think smoking a bit of weed definitely is not good for that, because that distorts your sense of reality. And again, like I said before, the paranoia increases and all that. But at the time, it was such a great solution because I could sleep for 10 hours a night.
Yeah.
So for me, it was okay, you can sleep for 2 hours and be up all night for chronic pain, or you can smoke a bit and sleep all night. So it's what would you choose, for people listening? What would you choose if you're in that state? Most people, I think, would choose the instant, let me sleep.
Yeah.
And weaning off that was also around the time when I had that panic attack and went to hospital. I was look, I'm just going to push through the pain. I know I'm going to have insomnia. I know I'm going to have this, but I've got to be really strict in everything. I cut out diet, the coffee and sugar as well in that week. And that was hard too. But the payoff was there. So,
Yeah.
but getting to the point of your question with the suicidal stuff, it's like, I mean, we all have like times where our life is so difficult that we feel like we can't manage it, and thoughts come in. I was very lucky that I had the right sort of support network to, be able to talk about it. And I'm very informed, from my counseling and coaching, like you said, where like, I know it's so important to talk about it, because that's where it gets easier, and I needed to do that. So I did. I talked about it with people I trusted. You were one of them. So look, but going to that place, like I wouldn't ever recommend it. So, if for people listening, it's like, take the precaution steps. Like preventing illness is so much better than trying to treat it, right?
Yeah.
So take care of yourself now is like, one of the things that I would say.
And that's, it's something that you mentioned is a couple of things there is talking about it, and knowing that would be of benefit. But then also you mentioned earlier that disconnect that we have and not listening to what our bodies are telling us. And we do live in a day and an age where people are go, or making choices that are perhaps detrimental to their minds and bodies, even if it looks good. So that stress, that busyness, that, even just the environment that we put ourselves in. And you mentioned like earlier on, you had that bit of disconnect from your body and not listening to what your body was going through, and what it was telling you. But then I guess coming to that point of actually starting to, like what I've seen, what I've noticed is you paying a lot more attention to that mind-body connection and what is my body telling me? What does it actually need? What's going to be beneficial for it? And that affects your mental health as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And one thing, as you mentioned that I didn't mention yet was one thing that I craved this whole year, like throughout this whole thing, was like, I just could hear my body saying, stop putting things in your mouth, stop doing things that are like, satisfying your instant gratification.
Yeah.
And I've always learnt about fasting and everything like that.
Yeah.
And the benefits of that, and people with like even cancer and that reversing all sorts of chronic illness with just stopping everything and just going on water only.
Yeah.
And I wanted to do that all year, like I wanted to, but I was never really strong enough, like physically or mentally. I felt like I just couldn't do it. And I tried for periods to do cleanse things here and there. And it's like, but I only did short things, and I found myself giving in all the time because I was just so weak. And I wasn't doing it with anyone. So I wasn't like having someone help keeping me accountable. But I actually, my uncle and auntie live around the corner here as well. And one day I ran into them and got in, deep conversation with my uncle about his journey. And he's been, going through lots of depression and everything. But about a year and a half ago, he just cleaned things up and started fasting. Anyway, long story short, I decided to do it with him. So we decided once a week from Sunday night, last meal, to dinner Sunday night to Tuesday, 12 p.m. We fast on water. And then black coffee on the day in between. Yeah. Because black coffee doesn't break the fast and what happens to your body and the healing process. So I was like, okay, well, this would be good. I'll have someone to keep me accountable, which, I think is so powerful for like getting anything done. You need someone there to watch us because we're stupid and we're weak and we have limits. Like, we need help. We need people to do it. We're social beings, right? Yeah. So look, he's been an absolute incredible support for that. And it's got to the point where, that was around the same time I had the panic attack thing as well. Yeah. So I was like, okay, my body's been wanting to fast all year. Yeah. I've got someone who's very experienced in it and has clear evidence that it's helped him. And he claims to have cured his depression and everything, which he had for decades. So that's another dramatic thing I changed around that time, which I think's really helped clear everything up. Yeah. And right now, as we speak, as you know, I've actually pushed the extra day this time. Yeah. So it's actually been about 60 hours since I've eaten right now. So it's now Wednesday morning and I started Sunday night. So it's been interesting pushing it to that next day. But yesterday I ran 10 Ks for the first time in 6 months. And that was after only just having water for 36 hours. And it's incredible how much energy you can actually have. But yeah, look, I actually had a blood test about a week or so ago.
Okay.
And my liver is completely back to normal.
Amazing.
Everything's functioning properly. And yeah, like I said, everything's really clearing up right
Yeah.
now. I still got a bit of work to do.
Yeah.
You know, things take time to really replenish.
Yeah.
But I finally think that I've got a hold on, you know, the diet,
Yeah.
the fasting every week.
Yeah.
You know, I can meditate and stuff now when I
Yeah.
couldn't before. I'm running again, like
Yeah.
all that's back to normal. So it's, yeah, right now it's a nice feeling, you know.
Yeah. And I see the difference in you as well in this recent time compared to what you have been during this time. And something that kind of keeps coming up a little bit, whether it be with your fasting or when you went through your lowest of lows or what you're doing, is that, like you said, we are social beings. We need that connection. We need that accountability. We need that support. And so I kind of want to touch on that a little bit because I think that's really important in a year like we've had with so much isolation, people, you know, losing jobs, losing health, like losing people, having so many restrictions on us and being isolated. There's been a craving for more of that and we've needed each other more. And that's been part of your healing journey as well, is having people around and talking about it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, look, I mean, I'm fortunate because I've got a lot of family. You know, I'm one of 6 kids, so that creates a lot of support already. And even my parents both have lots of siblings, so you know, that's been really helpful. And I have a lot of great friends. You know, you and a couple of other people who, you know, they know who they are if they're listening.
Yeah.
They were really able to drop everything and
Yeah.
help because they knew how bad things were.
Yeah.
But the thing is, they only knew how bad things were because I told them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? So I realized, you know, you talk about isolation and like isolation and loneliness are 2 very different things.
Yes.
Because some people are okay in isolation, and especially if, you know, they've got their health and they're still able to work from home and all that.
Yeah.
But loneliness is a completely different thing. And
Yes.
for me, I had this kind of push-pull thing where there were heaps of days and weeks sometimes where I just wanted to just be on my own. And part of that was because I didn't want to burden other people.
Yeah.
But the other part of that was like, I was so ashamed and embarrassed and not myself that why would I want to socialize? Like I would feel embarrassed, like even just going down and getting a coffee, like with the rashes around my face, like there's a sense of shame and like guilt and I don't know, like there's all that.
You wanted to withdraw a little bit, and that's, I mean, I saw that too. You know, those moments where there was that withdrawal. And I mean, I think I said to you early on that I'm like, hey, I'm going to bug you. Yeah. But you know, we need that in our life, right? And I think you make a good point about isolation or being alone being very different to loneliness. Loneliness is so, I can't even find the word for it, but it is so detrimental to so many things, our mental health, our physical health, and it is a leading, I think, cause of or factor in things like depression and anxiety and even suicide as well, when people feel like they don't have that option or don't have anyone. And I think, you know, I don't know if that's something you've noticed this year, but more and more we're talking about that kind of stuff and recognizing our need for people and for connection, genuine connection, as well as the need to talk about mental health.
Yeah.
We, you know, psychologists and counselors are getting booked out completely at the moment. And more money is being poured into resources for mental health. And I think it's a good thing that's come out of this year, is that recognition of that. And I don't know how you feel like coming through this journey, like you've been to your lowest of lows, but then coming out of it, turning that around and going, what has been good? What's the good that's come out of this?
Well, I mean, where do I start? Like, I've had so much time, like you mentioned, like we've all been kind of in this isolation period where we've had a lot of time to really reflect on our lives and think about things. And for a lot of us, the loneliness can come to the surface because, if you don't have a partner or a family, that's, you know, you're even more susceptible. And look, I think, you know, because I don't want to like give too much, like I feel like I've been doing all the talking, which is fine, but I want to make sure that I get some points across that I really wanted to get across. When you go through like a really chronic illness and you know, the depression especially, like, sorry, I should talk more about the psychological stuff now. So I feel like there's this concept that I learned through my studies where we can go into this like underworld. And if you're listening and you've gone through some sort of experience like this, where you've been chronically depressed for a long time and, you know, lonely or whatever it might be, you do go into this underworld period where colors become darker. You know, what life seems like it's not worth living. Like, what's the point? And all sorts of like thoughts can come up, and dreams become nightmares, and you can't sleep if it's not that. Like, it's this really like next level thing, and I think it's a taste of hell, to be honest. But there's a sense of responsibility, I think, when you go through this dip and you experience that underworld, but then you come back out of it. And I think it's a social responsibility and a moral obligation now for me to share what I've learned going through that, so that other people don't have to experience that, if they can, if they can avoid it. Like, so like, look, it was hell all year, and I wouldn't wish it upon anyone, and I don't want to obviously go through it again, and I'm doing things to avoid that now. But after coming out of it, it's like, okay, now for me, I have a whole lot less shame than I had before. I'm willing to open up and talk about real stuff. I don't care if people you know, judge me for what things I've done or choices I've made or where I'm at in my life, you know, because we have this like, oh, I'm this age, I should have this, or you know, there's all these social expectations. But it's like, you know what, I'm owning my journey now, and I'm talking about it, and I think, like, you know, that's my obligation after going through this experience. And what have I learned? What's the biggest thing I could say? Like, you really need to reach out to other people. And, you know, people you trust, obviously, first. It's that kind of like, like, you know, the first circle of support is the people you really trust. And then, and that may not be family for some people. That may be a counselor or a psychologist or something, or, you know, your youth pastor or pastor at your church or whatever you might have. But yeah, I think for me, there's a lot of really good things that got me through that time. And I think, the people who are willing to just kind of drop everything and just be like, hey, let's hang out. And, you know, I don't want to talk about my illness the whole time. But, you know, it's nice to just have someone laugh and joke and muck around and play video games or watch a movie or go for a walk, or like just those simple things really helped. And there was one other thing I'll say that really pulled me through this year, which is super, super important, which gave me a sense of responsibility. I started coaching an under 10 soccer team back in June, or it was around June, July. Love soccer myself, and I love just being a leader and coaching and things like that. And I managed to connect with an under 10 soccer team, even though I just, like, half of me wanted to pull me back and go, no, don't go out in public. It's too dangerous. It's like, you know, people are going to judge you. Like, you look horrible, you feel horrible, don't do it. But then the other side of me was like, no, you have to do it. You've got to do something that gives you meaning and purpose, no matter how hard it is. So every week I had training on Tuesday night, and we had a game on Saturday morning. And boy, was it hard to show up to some of those, like, because I was really sensitive to weather changes and temperature stuff. But I did it, you know, like, I only had 1 or 2 games where I missed, but mostly I was there the whole season. And like, the beauty in the kids and the development, and, you know, the kids don't know how stupid you look or how ugly you are. Like, they just, you know, they don't judge you like we judge people as adults, so you don't feel as judged. And so that was like a really, really beautiful thing to have that, for so many different reasons. So many different reasons. And that was one of the key things I think that helped. It gives me a sense of purpose, I think.
And that purpose and meaning is huge. And I know it's always been huge for me, is having that in my life, because it is part of, I think, what actually fills us up and what gives us that get up and go. Like you said, like, you know, fought to get up and go, but you had a reason to. And that is key. Like, when we've got a reason for something, that makes all the difference. And it's something I know I've always sought in my life, whether it be the job that I do or what I'm doing in my life or reaching out to others, is what is meaningful about this. I mean, we as humans try and make meaning of everything, right? And sometimes it may be too much, we overanalyze, but at the same time, it's a huge part of actually living well and living a flourishing life and having a satisfying life is actually having something, a reason to get up, a reason to go to that place, to go to that workplace, to look ahead, to hope, to keep pushing forward. And whether, it's different for different people. A huge part of that for me is faith. But then always putting my hand to something that is impactful and meaningful in other people's lives, like living a bit outside of yourself. Yeah. Which is, I feel like what you were doing with that coaching, like you were living outside of yourself, and so hard to do that in that season. I was actually astounded when you told me that you were joining up to do coaching, and in the middle of all of this I'm like, wow. And voluntarily as well, that's huge. And that's yeah like, I mean, there's something that's really beautiful, I think, about humans. We even being in the underworld or being in your own sense of suffering and your own head and the demons and the lunatic in the attic going crazy, us as humans, we have this incredible ability to just rise to the occasion, and really still do things for other people, even though we have such incredible battles on our own. And I've reflected on this a lot, and quite often I get really emotional about it, in the kind of a good way. And I can feel it coming up now, but can see,
but it's beautiful, people really, just are there for each other when the storm comes, which obviously we can prevent storms, but when they do come inevitably, we have this ability to really rise to the occasion, no matter how small or big that may be. Because I think we have this misconception in the Western world that it has to be huge for us to have an impact. And it doesn't. No. It really doesn't. It just has to be one small thing that you physically can and will do that will get things going. And then I find that it's kind of like the pay it forward concept. You do that for the kids. For me, for example, all those kids are going to develop and into much better little awesome guys, and they're going to grow up and carry things that you can teach them. That spreads on.
It does.
And it's beautiful.
If you can just get to that point in your life where you're showing up for someone, like you said, it doesn't have to be this grand big gesture or change the whole world, but just show up for someone. Because you don't know the impact that's going to have. And particularly, again, out of a year like this, with so many people whose worlds have been turned upside down, if you can be that person that just shows up for that one, and they get through it because of that and build that resilience, and then can show up for someone else going forward. What a domino effect, what an impact that has, right? And it's just showing up for one. If that's all you can do, show up for one, because then they're going to be able to show up for someone else because someone showed up for them. It's as simple as that.
And you'll find that, two things. Firstly, I think that, showing up is so important, and sometimes you don't need to even do anything, but just physically being there and giving up your time to be with someone. Like I said, I didn't want to always talk about my illness because I'm living my illness. I'd rather not talk about it sometimes, actually. I want to kind of just be known as who I am, and maybe, when I was in the really, horrible storm part of it. And then the other side of things is I think with when you actually show up, you'll find that you'll overperform. I found that because, I would be like, I really don't want to go to soccer training tonight. It's freezing cold out there. I get shivers. I get really aggravated by it. It really upsets me. But once I got there, it was an hour of my mind was completely distracted from my illness. So that was a great benefit itself to have that distraction, a healthy distraction. And I found that I was overperforming, where I just previously getting into it, I just didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
It's kind of like exercise too. I think we do that
Yeah.
often with exercise. I don't want to go to the gym. I don't want to go to the gym, but then you finally do, and you do it, and you feel great for it.
Momentum. We often seek the motivation first, but that often comes because of the action we take. So action often precedes motivation.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, what comes first?
I know,
I don't know.
yeah.
Like, you just gotta do something. Like,
yeah.
yeah.
And that's, even that, this year with so much downtime, I mean, as like, I lost my job this year. The whole company has gone. And so, I was at home a lot and didn't know what the future looked like. I didn't know, like, finding a job in this year was like, how do I do that? I was applying for jobs I was well and truly qualified for and not getting any. But just even that is just, you'd get up and what have I got to put my hand to today? I don't have any motivation. Just do 5 minutes of this. Just do one thing on your list. Just keep going. And then that builds that momentum and that motivation, and you find yourself on the other side of it eventually.
Yeah.
Right? So
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
I think that's great. Like, just think about like doing something that you can do and will do.
Yeah.
And once you start, it's it's
because it can seem really overwhelming, and when you are in that state, like you talk about being in the underworld or having, like, you don't want it, it's so much effort to go out, or you've got all these other feelings of shame or anything like that. Sometimes it's just breaking it down into those small things, and I've certainly had to go through that before, like where it's literally been, okay, I'm gonna make myself a cup of tea. I'm gonna go for a 10-minute walk. I had to break it down to that level, and that's okay. It's okay to be in that place, because we all go through that, but you will come out the other side of that as you do that, as you keep just tiny little toe forward, not even a step.
Yeah, because there's this idea of like, and what you're talking about is like self-care as well, right? So and we tend to throw the towel in when we're like at our lowest, or when we're in this state of loneliness or depression or whatever you're experiencing. That's not good, right? Not what you normally would be thriving on. But I think there's this understanding where, okay, we all kind of know this, like, okay, you shouldn't get into a relationship until you're good with yourself, and you got to make sure you're right, otherwise before helping others, otherwise, and again, it comes back to what comes first, because sometimes helping someone else can help give you a sense of worth and well-being and responsibility. But I think a good concept to have, which really helped me, was like, I am a person in this community, right? And if you detach your identity from yourself, you have to think like, okay, in the future, if I do something good for myself now, I am helping someone in the future, which is me, right? But in the future, then that future me will be better off to serve the community. So everything you do for yourself is for your community, not for you.
Yeah.
Because it's not about instant gratification. It's about delayed gratification, which is a really hard thing, but all the, like, pretty much all the successful people in this world, delayed gratification. That is the key.
Yeah. Thinking about that future self.
100%.
Yeah.
Like that's it for me. Like, that's a huge lesson I learned this year.
Yeah.
And yesterday when I went running, I said I'm going to run 10Ks, but I was like, oh, this is going to be hard. I haven't done it in 6 months. I haven't eaten for 36 hours. I wonder how it's going to go. I was like running and I was like, cool, I'm getting gas. And I looked at my watch and I was like, 1 kilometer. Are you kidding? So anyway, I pushed through, right? But I really hit a dip at like 7 kilometers.
Yeah.
And at 7 kilometers, I used to tell myself, like, a lot of, because of poker and that, I had a lot of like ways that I would like help push through challenges. And they will all be about kind of like, okay, you've got this, you've got strength, you've practiced, it'll be all those types of things. Now, yesterday when I did that run, it was like, other people need you, right? Push for them. Like, you need to be strong. You need to be fit. If you can't get through the next 3 kilometers, how can you expect to be there for your friends and family and community? You have to push through this for them, not you. Because that keeps me accountable, and that like that helped push me through. And again, it was hard, but in those last couple of kilometers, but I got there. I slowed down, but I didn't stop. And that's a good analogy, I think, for, well, my life anyway.
Yeah.
When things get hard, slow down, reflect, but don't stop. When you stop and when you become stagnant,
yes,
that's when things start shifting towards that underworld.
Yeah.
And that's a dangerous place to toy with.
Because it becomes very insular. You know, even in that space, you know, of limited capacity, like if you do really fully withdraw, you become very insular. And so I think, yeah, like absolutely take care of yourself. You do have to, because you cannot give out of what you don't have. You absolutely cannot. Like if you got nothing in the tank, what have you got to give? Nothing.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how do you fill up your tank? How do you look after yourself so that when you are showing up, even in a limited capacity, you've got something there? So we you know, all this self-care sort of stuff can sometimes get a bit like, oh yeah, self-care, everyone's talking about self-care, or it's selfish, or things like that. And it goes much deeper than that, I think. So it means we're showing up not just to be the best potential that we can be, and actually honoring ourselves, but we're honoring the people around us, and it means we're showing up. And there's going to be seasons of limited capacity within that, and that's okay. You've got to know your limits, right? And I think a lot of people this year have probably gone, oh yeah, I was doing so much, or I need to slow down, or yeah, I've discovered some things about myself that I need to sort of sit with and work through. And if they can do that in a healthy way, it's just going to have a snowball effect and give them a greater capacity than they ever had before, without all the striving and the busyness and the stress and that chronic sort of, you know, this state.
Yeah. That hyper state where
it's
things
not good for us.
No, well inevitably.
Bodies.
Well, honestly, inevitably, shit will hit the fan, which is what happened to me. I think, you know, like I was in this state of like I said, back in January, February, where I kind of was just chronically stressed and doing things like eating too much food and sugars and all sorts of things that, like, you know, are not good for us. And inevitably, I was always going to have this experience now when I reflect back on it. So you could call it luck, or you could call it whatever you want, you know, genetics, you know, bad luck of being around a virus or things now I'm maybe allergic to or whatever. But no, you've got to make sense of it. And my sense of it was, this is always going to happen. And everyone has that coming ahead. That's the flood. That's the storm and the flood that's coming. And you need to prepare for it now to either prevent it or have a strong arc, I guess, to float through it. And there was one thing you mentioned about, okay, so when we think about like, okay, just still keep doing things, even if it's the smallest thing. But I find that when you dip below, like, I can't even do that 5 minute, you know, make myself a cup of coffee or go for a walk or whatever it might be, you got to lean on other people. You have to, and I did that. I got to a point where I threw my ego aside and I lent on those really close to me. One of my brothers was the main one. You know, even financially, he really helped through this, and thankfully, he was in a great position to be able to help. And that's where you want to be. You want to be that person that can be lent on during those times. Like, to help others. So that's where all the self-care comes back to taking care of yourself. And if it wasn't for him, and a lot of other things, but if it wasn't for him, I would literally be on the streets right now.
Wow. It's huge, isn't it? So many people, and I still hear this today with working with people and doing counselling or coaching with people, that I haven't ever talked about this before. I don't like to talk to people because I feel like it's weak. Or that I'm burdening someone. And there's still that mentality of it being a sign of weakness to actually be vulnerable, or to say, I actually need someone else. I need to talk about this. And I just always come back at that going, it's so brave. It's actually really strong. Like, that is exactly, it's brave and it's strong.
It's courageous.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, every hero has a little bit of that, like, vulnerability. You know, Superman's got kryptonite.
We've all got a shadow.
Absolutely. We have that little thing that can pull us back, right?
None of us are immune from it. Absolutely none of us. And we don't often see what's going on behind closed doors, behind the filters of Instagram and all the highlight reels and all of that, but none of us are immune. And I think if we can get that out of a year like this as well and go, we need each other, and it's actually really courageous to talk, and it's one of the best things you can do is just let some other people in. There's a great strength in that, and it's not weak at all. Like, it's far from it. So I still hear that sometimes, and I just go, oh no. And then I thank people for actually talking to me. It's a privilege and an honor to sit in that space for someone, I think, and I thank them for that, because they've taken a huge step. And so anyone that hasn't spoken to someone yet or is struggling with this sort of stuff, I would just, I feel like you should be honored for taking that step. It's not a weak thing. So that would, again, my encouragement as well to people, like you're saying, is talk to someone, lean on someone. We need it. More than ever. Right?
And we're in a we're in Australia, for anyone listening overseas, for my 3 followers. We have a really good system in Australia, and a lot of other countries do as well, where there is support if you don't have family or friends, or you just simply don't want to talk to someone in your community, because you're afraid of the judgment or whatever. Everybody has underlying things with relationships, and so the huge benefit, as we know as a counselor, is that it's completely private and confidential, so you can really hold nothing back and let it out, knowing that it will stay between you and your therapist. I mean, you and I are counselors and coaches, so this is my little plug. If you need support, we're here. You can contact us. We can do it over Zoom. We can, do it in person if that works. We're both qualified. We're here to help. So if you need help and you want things to be private, then reach out. But in that, I'm interested to know what your experience has been like this year, working as a counsellor, working with people through isolation or any kind of mental illnesses and things. We've got about 10 minutes left. So.
Keep it quick, Jess.
Well,
it's been, an interesting year for my own journey personally, but then what I'm finding in working with people and with counselling is that there's a greater need for it. There are people starting to open up about things that they just never had before, but something that's really interesting that I've found is almost like this: people have gone through this survival mode, and they're getting to this point now going, oh, that happened. That's affected me more than I realized. Or and I think that's really normal, because we go into survival mode, and then as we start to come out the other side of it, it hits us. And we're like, hang on a minute, that happened back there. The worst of it happened there. That's really normal. So I would encourage people sort of in that space to be like, no, it's actually okay. This is part of the journey, and you do need to kind of debrief that stuff. But like even hearing there's a lot of what people are really struggling with is a lot of the uncertainty around things, and that so much is out of our control. And that's a struggle for us as human beings when things are out of our control. And this year, more than anything, I think has shown us how much is out of our control, right? But then I think that can really help us focus in on, what do we have to stand on? What is it in my life that is meaningful, that I can stand firm on? And what is it that I can, as things around me shake basically and crumble, where do I stand? What do I have to hold on to? And I think it's so important to find that thing. That might be in your relationships, in your family and friend, or something that you're living outside of yourself for a purpose and meaning, or it's faith, or whatever it is. The world around us shakes and crumbles time and time again. It just goes in cycles. And, I think people are discovering that and really struggling with that. But I think it's so important to find that firm foundation that you can sort of hold on to during these times. So, but it's affected people in so many different ways. And I think sometimes people feel guilty. That's the other thing that's come up. Guilty because they're struggling with something when they know someone else is struggling with what they perceive as something greater. Oh, well, this person lost their job. At least I kept my job. But they kept their job and never took a break, and everything's changed for them. And it's, you know, they've had weddings cancelled or travel cancelled, or, you know, they've been stuck at home and it's brought up a few things for them, or whatever it might be. People still compare. And I think we need to just acknowledge and give ourselves permission to feel what we're feeling. Like, what you're going through is valid. It's not invalidated by someone else's experience, and never should be, no matter what the difference is. We're all on a different journey. So I think I've seen a little bit of guilt around feeling bad for, oh, it didn't affect me as much, or I'm feeling bad about this, but that's not as bad as someone else. It's like, no, it's okay. We're all got a different journey with this. It's affected us in different ways. And, you know, it's okay to, you know, some people have done really well out of this year. Own that.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah,
It's
absolutely.
okay. Not take away the comparison, take away the guilt and the shame over things. So I know I've said a lot in that little
No,
thing,
it's
but
interesting,
yeah.
and a couple of things that I'd like to ask you about is, you know, that comparison to other people. I think comparison to other people is actually a really healthy thing, but also you have to be careful, like you said,
Yeah.
because, you know, the only reason that we continue to evolve is because we compare to others. If you think about any sport or any business,
Yeah.
like, people are constantly trying to one up each other, and I think that's
Yeah.
awesome, because we progress and we become stronger and more evolved,
Yeah.
and we, you know, that's fantastic. The problem with what you're trying to say, I think, is like, well, when you compare and think, oh geez, life's better than this person, or I should be grateful, or not as good as this person, or whatever,
Yeah.
that's when it becomes like
An issue,
a detrimental
yeah.
thing on your own psychological health, right?
Exactly. It's the shoulds, or the, like, I should this, I shouldn't that, or the feeling less than, or feeling not enough, or like you're not in the right place yet. And ultimately, like, maybe the word is using others and other people's lives as inspiration and motivation and drive, as opposed to comparison, perhaps, because we can't ultimately fully compare our lives with someone else's, because we're so individual and there's so many different factors involved with that. So yeah, let it other people's lives help go, yeah, you know what, I'm going to get up and go, or I'm going to push that little bit further, or I'm going to be inspired or motivated to do something. But ultimately, we've walked a different journey. I can't compare to them exactly. It's impossible. So, and I think you said something to me earlier this year that you'd read in a book that I thought was really good. The only person you compare yourself to is yourself, and to yourself yesterday. And I think that's all we can do, is like, how am I today compared to who I was yesterday? And compare that, as opposed to compare with others, because we live such different journeys. And I thought that was a really powerful thing as well. And it's true, like, we can't compare to everyone else, but we can compare to ourselves. The yesterday version versus the today version of me.
And that's the only, like, for me, like, that again is coming back to that idea of you're someone in this community that's worth putting the effort in to evolve, right? Because, and that's the only true way to know if you've personally evolved or not. Because you can't look at someone else's life at all. You don't know shit about other people. You see the tip of the iceberg and you think that's reality, but it's not. There's 9/10 of that
So
that's
much
like messed
underneath.
up underneath. But for us, it's like, we know all our deepest, darkest things that we've done. So we know the bottom of the iceberg. We know whether we've slightly improved or not. And I think that whole concept as well of, like, comparing to yourself from yesterday is, it's nice to get to the end of the day and think, okay, did I end the day slightly better than I started? Okay, like, have I reduced a little bit of suffering for myself or my community? Or have I planted little seeds that are going to grow into, you know, blossom later?
And do all of that with compassion and acknowledgement of where you're at right now. So if you've got a day where it's just like, you know what, I spent the day in bed watching Netflix and whatever, like, you know what, pick yourself back up tomorrow, because we've got to have compassion for ourselves. And I think something that you've said sort of through this, and I feel like I've gotten out of this year, is learning to actually be more in tune with where we're at. and with what we need mentally and physically as well, and how all of that's connected. So give yourself permission, give yourself grace and compassion, and listen to where you're at. And I think the more that we can do that, the healthier we're going to be, and the healthier versions of ourselves that we can bring to others as well. If we understand our limits, that we have compassion for ourselves, we're comparing not to others but to where we are in our journey ourselves, and using others as inspiration and motivation, then I think we can come to a healthier place and a healthier version of ourselves, and not live in this chronic state of striving and comparison and stress and all of that. It's just listen.
Yeah.
Stop and listen to yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you can listen without the judgment that you feel from others, which is probably not even there anyway, you know, because I know, right? Like, but again, like I mentioned before, you know all your deepest, darkest things that you've done throughout your life, so you're always going to be your worst critic.
Yes.
But that's a good thing in a way, because that's how we know whether we are progressing or not. And like you mentioned, if you have a day where you watch Netflix all day, you can get to the end of that and go, okay, well, did I need that? Yeah, probably I did actually. I needed a break. I needed to just chill for a little bit and distract my mind and relax. And if that goes into another day of doing that, then reflect on that yourself, right? Really think about how that makes you feel.
Yeah.
And, you know, counseling helps with that, of course, but like doing it yourself is even better, because you can think, well, look, I really actually needed 2 days. But then you might get to the point where you go, I shouldn't have spent that second day in bed. That was a waste of a day.
Yeah. What was I running from?
Yeah, exactly. What am I running from? What am I procrastinating from? You know?
Yeah.
And, you know, it might be a huge thing that you have to tackle on, but then it comes back to what we said before. What small thing can I do that will slightly get me a bit closer?
Yeah.
And through my chronic illness, as we kind of wrap up now, through my chronic pain and suffering this whole year, like I really, really learnt about how the small changes you make, and seeing day by day very minimal changes, eventually you start like just making huge changes. Like I feel my skin and I'm like, wow, this didn't change overnight.
No,
this took weeks and months and months of learning about my body, what it reacts to, like all that stuff. And I've learned so much psychologically and physically as a result of that. But it wasn't yep, that's it, today you're healed. It was like, no, you had to go through this journey, and we do that with all sorts of things with life. So.
Absolutely, yeah. It's been so good.
Well, thanks for doing this, and I know it's a bit different doing a bit of a reverse interview, as I like to call it, on my own podcast. But thanks for coming, and it's been cool chatting it out. And any last thoughts for anyone listening?
Oh gosh,
you got 30 seconds. Go.
Talk to each other.
Talk
to each other and just show up for that one person.
Even if it is yourself, right?
Even if it's exactly. Couldn't have said it better.
What a finish. All right, thanks, Jess.
Thank you.
Well, there it is, guys. Thanks for tuning in and listening right till the end. I hope you were able to gain a little bit of insight or learn a couple of new things from both mine and Jessica's experience this year with lots of things. If you do need support or further insight, please feel free to reach out to both me or Jessica. We both are easily contactable through social media, so you'll find a way to contact us. But and again, if you don't feel like you can open up to us per se, because you might be in our closer network, we can certainly guide you into a way where you can find other support elsewhere, which is a little bit more private and confidential. So thanks, guys, for listening, and I hope you're all doing well, and see you next time.